Am I audible, sir?
नाम बदल रहा हूँ मैं जरा, वो नम्रता छाबड़ा लिखा हुआ है.
Hi, John. Morning.
Hey.
Good morning, sir. I just got a call from Ambassador Fabian.
Okay.
He's all set.
Okay.
In fact, he
Could you
himself.
talk to Vice Chancellor, sir? Should I give him a call?
It's better if you could, drop a message or give him a call, because I don't have his number as such to, call and or maybe drop a message to him. So maybe you should drop a message or maybe call him. A gentle
Formally,
reminder
I should
before
call
the
him.
timeline.
His speech is scheduled at what time? 9:15.
Hi guys, 1 second. I'm opening all the documents right now. Just a second, sir. Inaugural address at 9:15 a.m. Yes. There is a message on the participants group asking the on-spot registrations have started or not yet.
On spot means that they can instantly pay using the account details shared.
Oh, okay.
So that is already there. So just reply by an email. That will be okay, I think. So we will start as per schedule. So
Yes,
I'm
sir.
just calling VC sir. Huh?
आप जिस व्यक्ति को कॉल कर रही है वह उत्तर नहीं दे रही है, कृपया.
Maybe he's getting ready. Huh?
Possible.
So Amit has developed a very good content.
Oh.
So maybe in between, wherever required, we can use it.
Absolutely.
very good morning, sir. Hope you are doing well, sir. Yes, yes, I'm fine, sir. Yes. So we are starting sharp at 9, sir. And okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So got a call from VC, sir. He will join at 9.
Oh, wonderful. Fabian also said he'll join a little early.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So tell our scholars to join immediately. There must be a gathering by 9.
Dr. VK Kuthiala is on with us, right? Yesterday, I suppose he said he was unwell and.
Kuthiala, sir, na?
Yeah. Said, I will only speak for a few minutes or something. The message said, something like that. So he's on, right? He will be at
Anything, you can at least stay joining, then it's very good. Yeah.
Okay. I guess only Pallavi Majumdar has left. Other than that, everything is as per the schedule, right?
And JC.
Yeah.
Gagdish Chandra.
Yeah. That's there. Yes. His session is replaced, right, by Ashok Bagaria.
Huh.
Also, sir, does Ashok Bagaria have any prefix as such? Does he have a PhD or something?
No, he's a scholar only, but
Okay.
he has worked in media for 20 years. And right now he's legal editor of TV9. I had sent you the profile, I think.
Yes. I have that. I was just wondering if we must
He's
have
not a
missed out
PhD.
on
He's not
something.
a PhD.
Okay.
He's not a PhD. Yeah.
Hi, good morning, sir.
Hi, how are you, Sunny?
I'm very good, sir. You tell me, sir. How are you, sir? You're looking good, sir. I mean, dressed in a formal tie and everything.
Thank you. Thank you. We start sharp at 9.
All right, sir. No problems.
Good morning, sir. Our Vice Chancellor, sir, has joined.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir. I don't have lunch. Very good morning, sir. Are we audible to you?
Yes, sir.
Kalyan,
Yes, sir.
switch on your video now. We start at 9. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, has joined. Please unmute yourself.
Good morning, Abhay sir.
Kalyan, we may start now.
Yes, sir. A very warm welcome to you all. Before we begin today's conference, I would like to recite a shloka. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnuhu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. I, Kalyan Srinivas Regalla, a research scholar at the School of Communication, GDGU University, will be your host for today. May we all observe a minute of silence for the lives lost due to the pandemic.
Kalyan, continue, please.
We believe it is because of our gurus we are here today celebrating knowledge and sharing the same. In times like these, where pandemic is creating chaos in all our lives, a conference of this kind on strategic communication is the need of the hour. We are living in the information age, and communication plays a crucial role in today's world. One must communicate to be understood, and the key to a progressive life is communication. The motive behind this conference is to host intellectual conversations and presentations by bringing professionals, academicians, and scholars on one plane where experiences and knowledge can be shared. I would now like to take the opportunity of inviting our beloved Professor, Dr. Amresh Jha, Head, School of Communication, for the welcome note. Sir, over to you.
I take great pride in welcoming our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, all the eminent speakers, academicians, researchers, journalists, and students from all over the world to the first international conference on strategic communication organized by GDGU University. The aim of ICSC 2021 is to bring together a multidisciplinary group of researchers and academicians and the practitioners from all over the world to present and exchange breakthrough ideas relating to the strategic communication. I am sure that the conference will help in focusing attention on the recent outstanding achievements in the field of strategic communication and future trends and needs. People worldwide are more interdependent today than ever. And as the world becomes increasingly interconnected to new forms of communication, better understanding of strategic communication is important for effective delivery of messages. It is evident from the ongoing developments in the area of communication that those with the most extensive and strongest communication bridges will command power in the global communication. Technology has changed the way we communicate. If organizations want to reach their target audiences, they must be prepared to use the most effective communication channels to get their messages across to the various stakeholders. Today, social media platforms come with built-in analytics tools as well, so organizations are able to measure in real time and from period to period just how effective their messages are. The strategic communication plan also involves the analysis of the reach of the content to determine if changes should be made to better achieve the goals of the messaging strategy. Obviously, communicators who can capture an audience's attention with the strategic planning and compelling messages have a powerful advantage in the market. I am delighted to share with you that the conference has received many research papers from across the disciplines like management, data sciences, law, humanities, social sciences, and mass communication, having disruptive ideas, hypotheses, and findings. On behalf of the organizing committee of the conference, I again welcome you and wish you a successful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. Every organization, be it academic or non-academic, is often led by a leader, one who we look up to, one who looks after us. We welcome Professor Dr. Tabriz Ahmed, Honorable Vice Chancellor of GDGU University, to deliver the address of the inaugural for the conference. Professor Dr. Tabriz Ahmed's expertise is in the area of cyber law, intellectual property rights, energy law, and jurisprudence. He has over 20 years of teaching experience and research experience with a rich publication profile. He is ranked among the top 200 law authors in the world by SSRN. He is among the top 100 most followed LinkedIn lawyers and has been ranked 13th in the world. He is also awarded top 50 IP players by IPR Gorilla USA. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kalyan, for a very elaborate kind of the introduction. It's a matter of great happiness that we are seeing that the International Conference on Strategic Communication is a reality by School of Communication. I must thank Dr. Amresh Jha for taking the time and also making it possible with the support of the entire faculty and the students. So let me welcome you all in this conference, and also you found time from busy schedule with a tough time. You know that we are suffering from a serious pandemic in the entire world, and India is worst hit. And thanks to this media and also the electronic communication, that we are able to really share our ideas and thoughts, and at least keep away from that negative news is flowing everywhere. This topic is very, very important. The conference on the strategic communication is a very, very important area to explore and discuss and debate and do research. And also we have very eminent personalities present in this conference. So let me also welcome from my side Professor B.K. Kuthiala, Professor KG Suresh, Mr. Jagdish Chandra, Dr. Ivory Lyons, Ambassador KP Fabian, Dr. Nirwan Bechan, and Dr. Birender Chaudhary. So thank you all for finding time and also gracing the occasion. Your presence shows that how important the conference is. And also what I see a lot of participants attending the conference. This shows that this area is very, very important and also require a lot of discussion and debate. We know that the media plays a very, very important role. I'm a great fan of media because my area is cyber law, and also I'm seeing from 1995 for the first time when we have seen internet coming and changing the entire paradigm shift. Because till 95, we had only the print media and the electronic media as a way of communication, and it was fully controlled model. That it was purely controlled model because a person who want to really say something over the radio or television or print media, it is not very easy. And print media was very costly affair. Electronic media was also costly affair. But what we have seen the great shift happening from 1995. And today what happened, the media is fully liberalized. In fact, it was purely controlled model in the hands of the government. But now, even a person can communicate to anywhere, any part of the world, to anybody, any person, anytime. So it is a positive kind of the approach that if you want to share your thoughts, your ideas, if you have a smartphone in your hand, you have the power to communicate to anybody in the world. But the side by side, also it is creating a lot of responsibilities that how to communicate, what to communicate, and what level to communicate. And also it is giving chance to the criminals, to the law breakers, that they will have more chances to attack you. So you got the lot of chance liberalized that you can communicate to anybody in the world. Because if you see and go back to earlier days, even to get a telephone connection, you have to struggle a lot. And only those who are maybe MLA or doctors, or maybe a person who have the high positions, they used to get the telephone connection. But right now, even anybody, single person, maybe rickshaw puller, maybe laborer, or anybody who may get a smartphone, he can get a SIM card, and then he can communicate to anybody in the world, whether it is a kind of YouTube channel or social media or by email. So it is giving chance for us to communicate. At the same time, it is giving chance to the lawbreakers, the freakers, to also maybe disturb the entire eco-balancing of the society, as well as also try to do a lot of cheating and frauds. So the way we are able to regulate the media, it is giving a lot of chances, lot of options to the Department of Communication, or those who are belong to this category, even the journalism and mass communication, is very important area to explore. And now we say that this is the third kind of the category of the national level, because media can change the entire discourse. And also we have seen the media trials. We have seen several cases, even the in several cases, what media has done. Media has tried to declare the case, or they try to punish somebody even without the proving of the case. So it means that media should play a very responsible role, that how you are going to communicate, how you're going to explore the things. That's why those who are the part of this group, maybe student, faculty, or researchers, they have kind of additional responsibility that what content should go, how to the prove that content, how to explore that content. Because what I'm saying that even somebody may not have done a crime, not done a wrong, but if media will try to project the way that he will be tried, and he will be even punished without the court is going to decide the case and make the punishment. So that's why media has play a very, very important role. And the biggest shift is that now media is not a local media, because we used to have the local news and then impacting the locally. But now a single news can impact globally. And that news can also try to affect society, try to affect the economy, and try to affect the polity and religion, culture, our mental peace and balancing. So media can do a lot of havoc in the market, and also media can play a very positive role. And if media is responsible, that's why what I expect that this time, this is a serious time. That's why media should play a very kind of responsible role. Media should be very sincere and serious what they want to really tell. And then, because see, media should try to always find the truth. But because of the maybe lack of these resources, lack of the kind of the financial benefits, or maybe with the kind of the negative interest, people not going to really finding out the real and truth and try to project to the people. At the same time, people are misusing the media. And then that's why we have seen that if you see the last election of the America, and we have seen that a lot of cases that even social media was misused by social media. They want to change the mindset of the people. So if you want to suppose support some of the ideologies, some of the ideas to a political party, and they will track your data, and then they will try to use the AI and do analysis, and then filter out that who are the people who are against the government or against some ideology, against some kind of thoughts, and they will try to manipulate your thoughts. So that is kind of the involvement is happening by the use of the AI and the blockchain technology, and also because of the analysis of the this social media, your accounts and all. So it's a matter of the privacy also. So that's why this is very important area to explore, and it will require a lot of points to research. And what we have seen that even if you see the social media, how it is channelized. If you go on Twitter, Twitter was actually a place where you can quickly, communicate anything. But what is happening? It is fully politicized. All the politicians is now on Twitter, and they will be saying anything only on Twitter. In my one tweet, if I had millions of followers, in one single tweet, one liner can change the entire discourse. Same way, if you can see this Facebook, when it started, it was mostly for young people to go and share their kind of the thoughts and kind of the information, personal or maybe professional. But what happened now, the Facebook has become the place for those who are really old person, and because the young generation has shifted to the other platform. If you see, LinkedIn is mostly for the professionals, very nice place to at least stay there and share something very professional. So my point is that even the lot of media platforms is now become the kind of the significant for particular groups, and that's why those who are able to track and publish something and say something, they should be very, very particular, that because they should keep in the mind which kind of group they are going to communicate, and then how they are going to take it. If you see earlier days, even the reporting about the cases, legal matters was done by a journalist. They are not aware about the legal terms, legal implications, and they used to give some views about a Supreme Court judgment or new law, and then public in general, they used to get kind of the different perspectives. So my point is that every field has become very, very advanced, whether science and technology or legal field, or maybe fashion design, or maybe emerging field of the science and technology and computer science. We require the very prescribed journalism and mass communication, that the person who is writing some content should be aware that whom he is going to communicate, and he should be understanding the shoes of that group, and then they will feel that what they are writing, whether really it is going to communicate the same idea, or people may take some different perspectives. So that's why the understanding of the entire gamut of the things and understanding of the specialized area. So this particular field of the communication and also become fully kind of the specialized. And that's why if you're going to communicate, be very careful that whom you're going to communicate, what you're communicating. So ultimately the person who is targeted should get the actual perception what you want to communicate. So that's why the role of the teachers, research is becoming very, very important, and also the updated curriculum to include all the advanced things will be coming into account, and also that's why the strategic communication is very important field. So I must congratulate the Dr. Amresh Jha, the head School of Communication, for really finding a very, very important area to explore, and must thank all the people who are attending this program, and must congratulate that if you are presenting a paper, you are really lucky enough in this difficult time, at least you are away from that negative news and also trying to get some learning. With these viewers, I thank you all and wish you all the best. Please take care of yourself.
Thank you, Professor, for your insightful address. Audience, kindly note that after every address, 2 to 3 questions will only be permitted due to time constraints, and please refrain from asking questions more than once. Let us be accommodative so that all those present here will also get to ask a question if they have it. Moving on, our first keynote speaker for the day is Professor Dr. B.K. Kuthiala, the founding chairperson of Haryana State Higher Education Council. He has over 50 years of experience as a professor and academic leader. He had been the Vice Chancellor of MCRP Bhopal and the founding director of the Institute of Mass Communication and Media Technology of the Kurukshetra University. He is among few academic leaders in the country who has expertise in the area of strategic communication. We welcome Professor B.K. Kuthiala to deliver the keynote address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Honorable Vice Chancellor, GDGU University, Professor Tabriz Ahmedji, Head of the Department of Communication, Dr. Amresh Jha, the research scholar who is coordinating this effort, Kalyan Srinivasli, my student Kuldeep Sivaj, and dear students, scholars, and respected professors and practitioners of media who are going to be the speakers in this very interesting and innovative seminar. We must understand very clearly that all forms of media that are available to us, including social media, are the tools. These are the tools that establish the societal communication, they build the narrative of the system, and like any other tool, these tools can be used for the welfare of the system. They can be used to sustain the system, they can be used to change the system, and they can also be abused. There is all possibility, and we must understand that all these possibilities are there, and all kinds of people and groups are there to make use of them and also to abuse them. So, but I'm very glad that the Department of Communication of the GDGU University has selected a subject which is for very long being ignored, and that is strategic communication planning. We do a little bit of this strategic planning while planning advertising campaigns or the public relations campaigns. But the thrust of the whole system of strategic planning is yet to be brought to the academics. Hardly we have any inputs that we give to our students and scholars on this subject. So I'll try to put up the academic and the practical aspect of the strategic planning in my paper. Few years ago, you all remember that when Chinese products were being introduced in India, advertisement became very popular on the electronic media. A television commercial apparently meant to popularize Chinese noodles, in fact, establishes the superiority of products made in China. Over the years, Indian people have formulated a perception that products made in China may be considerably cheaper, but actually they are of very poor quality and do not last long. This commercial was aimed to manipulate this popular perception and plant the thought in the minds of the Indian children that Chinese goods are better and desirable. In this commercial, was not only selling noodles. There was no need to project the mother as Chinese and wearing a Chinese dress. The child also tells his sister, that not only their mom is Chinese, but also uses other Chinese products, including the cell phone. The perception management by using media of mass communication has been used for long, even during both the world wars, and all factions use pamphlets to either demoralize the enemy populations or establish the superiority of their side. Of all fields of strategic planning, diplomatic moves, human resource management, troops deployment, financial maneuvering, communication planning receives the least attention, though at times it may prove to be vital and most effective tool to achieve the desired goals. Economics all over the world, economies all over the world may be receding, political stability may be becoming more vulnerable, Social disharmony may be taking gigantic steps. Cultures may be becoming more and more pungent, but human connectivity is advancing in leaps and bounds, as your Vice Chancellor has just pointed out. Not only in the developing societies, but also in the underdeveloped systems, penetration of mobile telephony and internet has grown in an unprecedented speed. In the past, neither the radio nor the television could reach the lowest strata of the societies, but new media has done a wonder by connecting the largest sections of the human population. In the entire history of mankind, the quantum of social change that occurred during last 2 decades due to new technologies of communication is the largest as compared to what happened even in centuries. The service providers may have succeeded in strategic planning to distribute their hardware and services and masses, but the content of the communication has received scanty attention of the strategic planners. Today, in the past also, USA was the most effective strategic planner and has been able to market its atrocities on the people outside its jurisdiction as the sacrifice for the humanity. At one point of time, Soviet Russia also communicated the superiority of the leftist philosophy to the world effectively, but failed miserably against the information onslaught of the West, including the US. China is a new entry in the international information warfare. The examples of commercial of the Chinese noodles is only the tip of the iceberg. The manner in which China fed the Indian media about its justification of including into Indian territory is another example. The Indian media, both print and television, gave extra space and time to project Chinese assertions along with what our own government was conveying. The gradual perception management of the Indian population about China is a planned communication strategy by our unfriendly neighbor. We in India appear to be using communication media quite extensively, but in bits and pieces, not for the sustained long-term strategic effort. We hardly have a worth mentioning system of feeding the foreign media, even in New Delhi. Most of the news and comments that foreign media persons create is based upon the reports of the English media in our country. In this process, both the real India and the views of the government of India receive a scanty representation, resulting in incomplete and distorted perceptions about India all over the world. We may have the huge army of our able media persons, yet we do not have even one communication strategist worth mentioning. We have expertise to use media on piecemeal basis, but perhaps we do not have even a felt need to plan communications in a strategic manner to achieve our goals within and outside of our own country. The strategic planning of communication can be described as an effort to first list the long and short-term communication objectives, identify and understand the target audiences. Third, design a media mix to reach these audiences, create media content as to make lasting impressions. Next, actually reach the target audiences repeatedly in a planned manner, collect feedback from the audiences. Next, make midway corrections in media mix, media plan and the messages, and periodical impact analysis. In August 2008, a paper by Robert Hastings Jr. described strategic communication as a synchronization of images, actions, and words to achieve a desired effect. Steve Tathan of the UK Defence Academy argues that it is desirable to bound and coordinate communication together. It should be regarded in much more fundamental manner that simply a process, not simply as a process. The information effect should be placed at the very epicenter of all actions, must be calibrated against the effect, including the evaluation of second and third order effects. This, he argues, proper strategic communication He makes the distinction between strategic communication and strategic communications and prefers the former to achieve the objectives. Another important aspect is that strategic communication cannot be an effort isolated from primary of project planning. In fact, emphasis should be to make communication planning as integral part of the plan and policy document. An approved NATO document on policy on strategic communication highlights the desirability of integrating the communication efforts with the main plan in an inseparable manner. It states that coordinated and appropriate use of NATO communications, activities and capabilities, public diplomacy, military public affairs, information operations and psychological operations as appropriate in support of alliance policies, operatives and activities. And in order to advance NATO's aims, it is important to underline the strategic communication is first and foremost a process that supports and underpins all efforts to achieve the alliance's objectives. An enabler that guides and informs our decisions and not an organization in itself. It is for this reason that strategic communication considerations should be integrated into the earliest planning phases, communication activities being a consequence of that planning. In our own country, perhaps the longest information campaign was that of Ministry of Health as part of the population control measures. The campaign started in early 50s of the last century and is still on, but success in changing perceptions in favor of small families and fewer number of children has only partially succeeded. About one-fifth of the population, mainly of the lower economic strata, has not been targeted so far. The apparent reason is that it was a campaign in bits and pieces, and the thrust kept on changing. Assorted information events cannot succeed in changing the mindset and perceptions. Shining India campaign was about rupees 2,200 crores is another example. Out of the blue, the Indians were told that despite intense economic and social inequalities, India was shining. It failed to assess the perceptions of the people at the time when the campaign was launched. You cannot make beginning from the point where you have yet to reach, and that was the greatest disconnect. Perhaps the claim of shine was blinding for the common Indians. India Shining was a communication event management and not even a campaign, what to talk about the strategy. Communication theorists describe this non-strategic communication in terms of bullet theory. Information is fired rapidly like bullets in the direction of the targets, but without taking a precise aim. The result is huge redundancy in and washed out efforts. Long back, Steel Authority of India took up a strategic communication campaign over the years, created an image of them as a company that is socially relevant, and yet it also makes skill. Delhi Development Authority during last few decades or so has systematically managed to change the public perception of the people of Delhi about DDA from being a highly corrupt and inefficient organization to one which is committed to transparency and public convenience. Another failure of thinking and planning in terms of strategic communication planning is our war with Naxals. We are hardly fighting the Naxals on the ideological front by taking up information to the minds of the already affected and likely to be affected populations. No one is shouting that Maoism has failed elsewhere, and it is bound to create more problems than it can solve. Deployment of uniformed personnel and launching combat can be one part of the strategy, but psychological combat by way of information onslaught is hardly being planned. Maybe it is essential to prepare the populations where Naxalites are likely to extend their wings to oppose Maoism on the ideological levels. But it needs a mindset of strategic and systematic planning of changing the thought and behavior Unfortunately, the experts are perhaps not even sensitized to this kind of psycho warfare within the country. We do not know whether Gandhi's consciously planned the communication strategy for non-violent protest, but there appears to be a shadow of consistent progressive effort to inform and mobilize the people. Swami Vivekananda had a well laid down strategy to re-establish Vedanta and superiority of Hindu thought well before he physically left India to conquer the world. His was a victory by communication effectively and strategically. By communicating effectively and strategically. In various management teaching programs and the communication and mass communication programs, finance, human resource marketing, etc. are essential components of learning. But it would be worthwhile to introduce the theory and practice of communication strategic planning. It would not only help in business, but it would also help in the process of governance. In addition, seminars, workshops, and add-on courses may also be organized to produce communication strategic planners. But this also needs strategic planning, of which we are shy to be a great extent. I'm highly appreciative of the Department of Communication of GDGU University to have initiated this discussion, and I hope that this discourse that would be created amongst the students and teachers of mass communication, and in which experts from various fields, from academics and profession, are going to put up their views on it. I am very sure that communication strategic planning would gradually become a course area of teaching, practice, and learning, and gradually we'll have an army of communication strategic planners, most of them coming from GDGU University, and I wish you all the success in this discourse and building a new kind of narrative, not only in the field of mass communication journalism, but also in the related field of management and advertising and marketing. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you. All the best. Jai Bharat.
Thank you, sir.
Kalyan, please
Thank you, sir,
unmute
for
yourself.
your address. Your inputs about strategic communication with real-life situations based on your experiences is surely enlightening to most of us. We again thank you for your address. And now the floor is open for questions directed to Professor Dr. B. Kuthiala. Participants wishing to ask a question may use the raise hand option in the features on the Zoom. You can raise your hand. I just raised my hand, then it is on the screen. So that way you can do that. So that will be easy for all of us.
And Mr. Fabian has a question, sir. You can ask. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Thank you so much. I don't have exactly a question. All that I want to say is that I benefited a lot from the keynote, and that the point made about Maoists is absolutely well taken. We can't use only bullets. We may have to use bullets, but we should be using not only the bullets. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for agreeing with me.
Sir, how much is this topic relevant with respect to TV news content?
You see, Kalyan,
Yes, sir.
news is a different genre, is a different kind. News deals with now and here, right? So, as a matter of fact, your news in television or in print media or even on social media has to be different, but organizations, news organizations, news collection and dissemination systems, they used to have an editorial policy. But I do not know whether at present they have a very clear-cut editorial policy. If they have an editorial policy, perhaps the political print on the editorial policy is stronger than the print of the societal welfare. The impartiality of the presentation of the news, as your Vice Chancellor in his address said that, talked about the media trials. We have n number of cases where media found a person totally accused. He is not accused, but he is declared as a committer of the offense. But later on, the judicial process proved that it was wrong. So we must also learn our new news persons who are coming out of the departments of mass communication and journalism. They must be told to learn about the overall objective of societal communication, of which news is one part. News is only one part of that, and news has to be contextual and credible. It has to be contextual and credible. When you say that our paramilitary forces have killed so many of Naxals, no, these Naxals are not people from they are not from another planet. They are our people. How can you rejoice killing so many people? Or how can you rejoice killing paramilitary personnel? It cannot be. It cannot be an achievement of the government to have killed so many people. So these sensitivities have to be created, and there has to be total strategic planning of what we want to achieve out of our news bulletins. What do we want? Do we want to create a society which is more coherent, or we want to create a society which is more divided? This has to be the editorial policy. And our news presentation, selection of news, processing of the news, gatekeeping of the news, our presentations, our discussion should be on that basis. Because we all know that news has an impact. News makes the perception management a very potent area of our system today. But that needs to be the responsibility, sensitivity towards our responsibility as news persons, as communicators, as mass communicators, has to be inculcated at the school level, at the level where they are taught what is news, how the news is to be processed, how the news is to be presented, and what are the checks that need to be made before presenting the news. I think that needs to be strengthened.
Thank you, sir. And there is another question coming from Mr. Ahmed, and he has posted his question on the chat box. I'll read it for you. How to adapt other countries' model of strategic communication for the public sector practices to less developed countries such as Afghanistan?
You see, theories and practices, they are not country bound, they are universal. What applies in one situation, principally, theoretically, it should apply to the other countries as well. But the question has a significance because the local situations, the situations in different systems are different, and the structure of the media is also different, and the credibility of the media is also different. But overall, one must also realize that our goals of communication strategic planning have to be in tune with the national goals. What are the national goals of the majority of the people of country A, right? No, those should be intervened and interwoven with the goals and objectives of the communication strategic planning. If we want India to be self-reliant, that is a national goal, that we want to be more and more self-reliant, then our communication strategic planning of different media should also be part of that, so that our communication strategy also achieves those goals, societal goals. We have different goals internationally given to us. They have been revised again. Now, no strategic planning can be successful if we do not keep those global goals in our mind and plan like that. So we have to create, on the basis of the certain fundamental theoretical principles, we have to create our own strategies in each social and political system. For Afghanistan also, perhaps a total strategic planning needs to be carried out, but within the country, not by the other intervening countries. The people of Afghanistan have to create their own communication strategies. Maybe they can take lessons from other countries, but their strategic planning has to be their own, not by the other intervening countries. I hope you get the hint what I want to say.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Yeah, I got it.
Thank you, sir, for your composed and patient replies to all the questions raised. Moving on, we are delighted and glad to have Ambassador KP Fabian as our eminent speaker for today. He has served in the Indian Foreign Services for 36 years and was the ambassador to Italy and permanent representative to United Nations organizations, including Food and Agriculture Organization, World Food Programme, and International Fund for Agricultural Development. Ambassador Fabian is an exemplary writer and a speaker on international affairs. He has delivered several lectures at universities in Madagascar, Austria, Iran, Sri Lanka, Canada, Finland, Qatar, and Italy. The first address he delivered was on Mahatma Gandhi in 1969 at the Charles de Gaulle University, Madagascar. His presentation on the North-South dialogue was published as a monologue by McGill University, Montreal in 1983. Currently, Ambassador Fabian is contributing as the board member of the HOPE project and also as a professor at the Indian Society for International Law. We welcome you, sir. Sir, you got to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Kalyan, for that very cordial introduction, which certainly has demonstrated that I'm the youngest person who is in this cyberspace gathering. I'm so happy to be with all of you. I just wanted to make one point about, the keynote speaker spoke about Maoists, and I did make one comment. Permit me to make one more comment. He said very correctly that these are not enemies who came from planet Mars. They are fellow human beings. They are fellow Indians. They may have been misled by an ideology, but that doesn't mean they have ceased to be fellow Indians. Now, in that context, when I was in Canada, the Khalistan agitation was going on, and the operation that was carried out on the temple was going on. Can you imagine? I got a fax message from our Ministry of External Affairs: enemy killed 11, our losses 3. What do I do? I had 6 in my High Commission. All that I did was, as soon as I got the fax message, I tore it into pieces because I did not want anyone to see it. So communications are important, and we all have to remember that we belong to the family of India and to the larger family, Vasudevaiga Kudumbakam, the human family. Now, I wish to concentrate essentially on diplomatic communication, which is in general between states, but it can also extend to, with other international entities. But before that, let me make a point. Like charity, diplomacy starts at home. And I wish to give you a few examples. When I was Joint Secretary Gulf in MEA, and if I wanted some money in the next budget for one of my division's projects, what I did was I would call up my counterpart in the finance ministry. She was in charge of the budget. I would say, hi, how are you? May I come for a coffee? Well, South Block and North Block, we just walk across. Well, I landed there, talked about the weather and other things. And then I said, look, I need some advice. I need this much money. Now, this is the purpose. Okay. Then I will tell her, listen, please tell me what you want me to write. I will write the noting exactly as you want. So, I will do that. It will go to her, and naturally she will approve. But in the normal course, what used to happen is that you write a note from your ministry, it goes to the other ministry, it goes through various levels, people will ask questions, and it takes a lot of time, and it can also be shot down. So, diplomacy starts at home. Now, the purpose of diplomacy, it is to resolve problems, isn't it? Now, let me just give you 1 or 2 examples more. During the evacuation from Kuwait, I'm talking about 1990. Most of you might not have been even born then, but let us move on. 1990, 2nd of August, Saddam Hussein, in his unwisdom, decided to do a picnic in Kuwait and then stick around there. America wanted him to stick around there so that they can take the military action. India tried hard for a non-military resolution, but we didn't succeed. So finally, we had to get our people out. Well, we started the airlift, and then sometime in October, I went to Amman, October 1990, at the hotel, Grand Hotel Amman. At breakfast, the Air India manager came to me with a very long face. I asked him, please sit down, Manuel, have a coffee. Sir, no coffee for me. Okay, tell me what it is. So I had to be a bit of a dentist to find out what exactly the problem was. The problem was that the previous evening, the Air India crew had walked out on Manuel, the manager. Why? Because the passengers, or people who are being evacuated, they used to come from very distant places where they were put up. And their bus was always stopped by the Jordanian police for inspection. So they came late, not because of their fault, you follow, but the Air India staff said, listen, we have been on duty from 6 o'clock onwards, 6 p.m. Now it is 10 p.m. And by the time we reach Bombay, it will be so many hours on duty. Well, we have our trade union rules. We can't be on duty non-stop for more than X hours. So we are walking out. Now the poor guy had to find arrangements for our people to stay there and all that. Very messy. So then he wanted me to talk to Foreign Secretary or to Civil Aviation Secretary or to Civil Aviation Minister. I said, let me think about it. Then what I did was, I rang up the Hindu correspondent, Firdaus Khargamwala. Firdaus, as you know, is a Persian word, which means paradise. Paradise comes from Firdaus. Okay. He was earlier in the Foreign Service, junior to me, but he got disenchanted and went back to the Hindu. So he was in Bahrain. I called him. Firdaus, I want you to carry a story. What's the story? The story is that in a situation of emergency, when the nation is facing a challenge, Air India has risen up to the occasion. Passengers can come 3 hours late, 7 hours late, 10 hours late, doesn't matter. Air India is there with a namaste and a smile. They couldn't care less if they have to work non-stop for X hours, whatever be the value of X. So Firdaus said, Fabian, is that true? So I said, it is not true right now, but I expect it to be true if you carry the story. Then he hummed and hawed. So I said, all right, you just produce verbatim from a senior Joint Secretary to Government of India. Nobody will find fault with you. It will be the only Joint Secretary who will be in trouble. So my neck is there. I don't mind. Well, the next day, the same manual came with a beaming face. Sir, everything is okay. So what happened? Oh, the crew has told me that there will never be any problem. So what happened? Oh, they had a meeting of the Guild of the Pilots and another meeting of the crew in Bombay, and they said that there is high media praise for Air India. So we have to, level up to the praise. And that was that. So the problem was solved. So what's the lesson? Praise people. You can get away with anything. Then you need a little imaginative thinking. Same Amman, we had gone to a place where, our people were there and Filipinos also were there in the same building. But our people were not getting water, bottled water. And our people told us, listen, these Filipino women, they are very smart. They flirt with the Jordanian police and they get all the water. So I said, all right, I won't take it up with the Jordanian police. Let them go on flirting. I made a phone call to our ambassador in Abu Dhabi, the late Sethi, A.R. Sethi. Told him, listen, this time I want to talk to you, but after that I want to talk to your boss. Okay, she's here because she was the president of the Indian Women's Association and they have the money. Well, I told her, she said, no problem. Within half an hour, we got intimation that a big truck with bottles was coming because she made a phone call and the company in Amman started. So it requires some imagination. Now, let me tell you about, classical diplomacy, which was there in a manner of speaking when I was there. That is 1964 to 2000. In Vienna, where I was first secretary, my ambassador VC Trivedi, we were on the board of the IAEA. There were things moving against us. Suppose the Australian had proposed a resolution, which we didn't like, but my ambassador will start saying that we have so much in common with Australia, Commonwealth, democratic credentials, and so much and so much. And I congratulate my Australian colleague for his excellent presentation. I just want to add a few points. I tell you, by the time Vishnu Trivedi finished it, he would have demolished the whole thing. You see, that is classical diplomacy. Now what is happening? Biden calls Putin a killer. Of course, in public. No? Trump had abused the North Korean in public, and again in public he embraced him. Okay? Obama had refused to sit at the same table with Putin way back in Paris. I think it was the 60th anniversary of Normandy. And poor Hollande, the French president, had to eat 2 dinners the same evening, one with Obama and others, another with Putin. Now, this is no way of dealing with people. You have to deal with the people who are in office. You may not like that person, but in public, best of manners. In private, when you talk strongly, you talk clearly. But even there, sobriety of language always helps, always helps. Nowadays, there is a lot of public diplomacy. May I continue for a few minutes more?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, public diplomacy is important, especially in democracy. We have to carry people with us. But it can also be carried out in a manner which is coming in the way of proper diplomacy. Now, public diplomacy, in a manner of speaking, started in the United States. You know, they have a counselor for public affairs and all that sort of thing. But let me tell you, classical, best type of public diplomacy was carried out in India under Indira Gandhi during the Bangladesh crisis. What did we do? We wrote articles, you know, in world papers. We got senators and other opinion leaders to visit, you know, the camps where the refugees were kept. And we explained to them why it was happening. You know, that was public diplomacy at best. In fact, I had a little experience in Vienna. One day, the US counselor called me, "Morning, Fabian, what the hell have you done?" So I asked him, "Sorry, what have I done?" "Oh, don't you know that my daughter is sitting in front of the railway station along with other young people because you inspired them?" So I said, "Listen, I had gone to the Vienna University, I had spoken to the youngsters, but I didn't tell them to go and sit in front of the railway station. But if they have done it, I salute them. But I didn't ask them." And then, of course, I added, "I will come and see you. We'll discuss it." Now, again, coming to communication. 1998, our nuclear tests, the Italian Foreign Office summoned me. And the Foreign Secretary, he was, riding the high horse. How could India have done it? How could you have done it? So I told him, "Thank you. I shall convey to my government all that you have said and what our friends, feel is of great importance to us. But let me make a few points. Italy is protected by American nuclear weapons. India is not protected by American nuclear weapons. 2, we have done it much against our will because we have been campaigning for nuclear disarmament for decades, but it hasn't happened. Therefore, we were forced to do it. You know about our nuclear neighborhood." Third point I made was that, listen, somebody in Delhi is watching how European capitals are responding. Then I told him how Paris had reacted. They showed great understanding. As ambassador of India to Italy, it is my task to improve our relations. And I hope that somebody in Delhi will not say that Italy's reaction was the fiercest. Let us work on it. He kept quiet. So I asked him, "Excellency, do you have anything to add?" He said, "No." I thanked him and left. But now I think this is the last point I'm making because I had other points, but I think let me sort of leave some time, if there is time for questions. You see, as I was waiting to be summoned as I was waiting at the reception in the Italian Foreign Office to meet with the foreign secretary. The Canadian ambassador also came for another appointment. Do you know that the moment he saw me, even without greeting me, he started screaming at me. How the hell did you do it? How could you have done it? So I told him, Ambassador, good morning. I will come and discuss with you one of these days. My office will get in touch with you. And the Italian receptionist was flabbergasted. She had never seen an ambassador shout at another ambassador. Let me stop here, if you permit. And thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have questions lined up. A lot of people have been posting their questions, and there is an order in terms of how the participants will ask. Mr. Ganesh, you could ask your question, followed by Madam Vandana and Shamanujha Das, followed by.
Yeah. So thank you. It was very insightful. And my question is, do we use strategic communication only, say, related to diplomacy? And given that there's a lot of trade and other activities are happening, like mergers and acquisition investments, and we have seen how governments come into play during, say, the Chinese investments into India or the Indian investments elsewhere. So in this situation or scenario, are there any best practices that we can take from a strategic communication perspective, we can take from, say, the diplomacy and use it for business purposes? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do I answer questions one by one, or we sort of bunch up one or two questions? Because
so one by one. I mean, however it is convenient for you, sir.
No, I'm fine with one by one. Well, thank you,
we can go with one by one.
Thank you, Ganesh, for that very interesting question. First point is that, as I had said, diplomacy or diplomatic communication is only a part of strategic communication. You know, there's a lot of strategic communication taking place between Oxford, AstraZeneca, and COVAX in Hyderabad unit. You know what I mean? Or right. Between AstraZeneca and the European Union. You know, all that. So, only thing is that I wanted to confine myself to diplomatic. Now, your specific question was about China. You know, the actions we have taken. Well, let me put it this way. A democratic government has to respond to certain situations, and respond to certain situations taking into account people's sentiments. You know what I mean? So the need to take into account people's sentiments might require deviation from the ideal classical diplomacy, which I sort of put across. So right. I think the government was right in making statements about certain restrictions we wanted to put on imports from China. At the same time, I want to say that well, we may do that in an episodical manner, but I do not believe that we can have a trade war with China, because it just doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And just as a follow-up, is any best practices that we can take from, say, diplomacy communication and link it with, say, the business communication when we are actually communicating with, say, other countries and cross-cultural, when it involves cross-cultural people as well?
Yes, in general, I would say never offend anyone in public.
Okay.
You may disagree, but you can, what is diplomacy? Diplomacy is the art of disagreeing, not disagreeably, but agreeably.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, I think it is my turn. This is Bandana. Professor Kalyan. Can
yes,
I go next?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fabian. This was your lecture is so inspiring, and you have shared your experiences, which are equally insightful. And especially, I am very moved by the experience that you shared about Air India. where during the hour of need, Air India had opened their doors for anyone who's coming late, whether it is 3 hours, 7 hours, and they were standing there with the open arms to welcome them. So I just want to take your advice here. Can you share us with some pointers as how we can rise up to this occasion, being a brand or a school? So if you can help with some pointers here in the time of crisis, how we can as a brand support. So if you can just share some pointers about that.
Thank you, Bandana, for that interesting question. As regards my experience during the evacuation, there is an oral history spot arranged by the Indian Diplomats Association, and that has had so many footprints, sort of, downloads. But I have noticed that when I speak to, especially at schools, when I mention this, the youngsters, they figure it out immediately. And the same applies to universities too. In fact, the younger the interlocutor, the faster they get it. Now, basically, as I said, we have to think out of the box. Whenever there is an emergency, it calls for out of the box thinking. You just take this COVID-19. Now, there is an absolute disproportion between the number of vaccines required and the number of human beings who require it. Now, I'm looking at it globally, though I could also look at it in India level, but let me look at it globally. If you want to vaccinate everyone, 75% of the global population above 18, you would need about 8.4 billion vaccines. And there is no capacity. By the end of 2021 or even later, the global capacity will be about half of that. What is the solution? The solution is to waive the TRIPS, about trade-related intellectual property rights of WTO, and let others also, other pharmaceutical companies who have the ability, make the vaccine. Now, India took the lead. Our Prime Minister at the G20, which was hosted by MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the young Crown Prince. India made the point, but didn't get support. Later, India and South Africa took it up at the WTO, didn't get support. Well, at the latest is that we have got support from more than 100 countries, but United States, UK, Switzerland, and one or two other countries are standing in the way. When there is an emergency and people are dying, you can't be chasing greed. It's very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Fabian, sir. This is a wonderful insight. And I, as the head of my department, probably will do something about it. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Shamanu G. Good morning. And see, my question is, see, typically diplomacy is a mix of public posturing and a lot of communication, which is behind doors. But now with social media and many of the ambassadors, embassies, and states, heads of government on social media, and which is not one-way communication, the people asking questions. Sometimes they say something probably without too much of a thought or in. So how is diplomacy now impacted by the rise of social media, especially open media like Twitter?
Thank you. Well, it's a very topical question. I do not know whether you came across what happened in Australia. An Australian daily had criticized India, and then our Deputy High Commissioner sent a letter, and they responded by hitting us harder. with some cartoons and all that. And there was a conference which was headed by our foreign minister with many of our ambassadors. And it was the opinion there that that was not the way to respond. You know, what we did in Australia was wrong. Were I there, were I the High Commissioner, I might have taken the editor for a lunch, or I would have asked my first secretary to get hold of the reporter and, you know, have a drink with him or a lunch with him and slowly talk to him. Because, you see, essentially a diplomat has to be credible. Okay? If you are not credible, it doesn't help. And let me share an actual example. Way back when I was in Rome, there were reports about some attacks on some Christian churches and Christian schools. Okay? And we got instructions from the MEA, actually it was MHA, Home Affairs instructions, saying that we should deny that these attacks are taking place and that these are law and order problems, rogue elements are doing it, and we are taking necessary action. And they wanted me to report what has been done. So I convened a press conference and I said, listen, you must have seen these reports about attacks. Well, unfortunately, some attacks have taken place. But what I want you to figure out is to look at it in the larger context, because the union government, the state government concerned, the media and the civil society, all of them have spoken in absolutely unequivocal terms, condemning the attacks. And the government has said that it will take appropriate action against those who have committed these atrocities. So that is it. India is a self-correcting democracy. It's not that India is perfect. And let us recognize that no democracy is perfect. You know, India is a self-correcting democracy, and there are issues, but within India, there is a resolution to it. Well, that is what they carried, the newspapers. India is a self-correcting democracy. And I sent it to the ministry. Well, I didn't hear anything from them. In other words, you know, they couldn't take it up issue. So what I'm trying to say is that, you know, we have to be credible. If you lack credibility, then whatever you say, no, you're talking to the wall.
So much of this media is an institutionalized thing. So you can plan some of these things. But in social media, it is like all real time, everyone, there is no control, anyone. So anyone can ask any question. So that was my point.
I agree with you. Social media is running amok. But I do not know whether there is a way of controlling social media, you know, because I do not know whether there is a way of controlling social media without infringing on freedom of expression. Maybe something can be done. You know, when somebody is propagating hate, well, action can be taken and should be taken, no doubt, you know, but you know, I mean, above all, ideally, we should regulate ourselves. But if that is not happening, the state has to intervene. You see, now the state doesn't always mean the executive. It can be the judiciary also. So it's a complex thing. But action needs to be taken, and there is much to be done to improve the level of responsibility and also a certain diligence. You know, I mean, if I put out something, I should not just forward anything which I get, unless I am sure that what is being forwarded is reasonably credible, you know, but sometimes people just forward mechanically. So we have to be disciplined. And I think what you said has much merit in it.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Ambassador Fabian. This is Veenu Sandhu. I'm a research scholar with GDGU and also with Business Standard. My question is about airlift. You know, you talked about the phenomenal work that Air India did, and the ambassadors across the countries also came together to do this. 25 years after that incident, that, episode, we had a film come out again titled Airlift, which completely distorted that picture. It, presented Air India as doing nothing, the ambassadors, Baghdad, Kuwait doing nothing. And that whole thing, it was, if you recall. So how important is it that, so many years later, when a narrative is being distorted, to counter that narrative, because that also became a very popular film? And how can that be done? The MEA issued a statement, but the statement didn't reach as many people as the film did. So how do you counter and communicate strategically that this narrative is completely distorted?
Well, thank you, for that question. I had myself been interviewed by the television channels about it, NDTV and others. And I remember as Joint Secretary Gulf, I was pictured sitting in a very poky little room, always worried about my lunchbox. I remember that. Anyway, that was, what shall I say, false description for, what shall I say, for getting people to see it, sort of thing, It is very difficult to combat that sort of thing. I personally didn't take much offense. So be it. Let them say what they like, We can't always. But I know of, there is one company which did make a film, not about the airlift as such, but about, because in that film, it was shown that a ship was coming from Kuwait to Bombay, carrying our pilgrims, our refugees, about 700 of them, and that the ship's captain was taking money. Now, I was involved with it in the sense that they had taken permission from us, from the government of India, before doing all that. And I had written to them appreciating what they did and saying that, it is great that you have risen up to the occasion and did it without taking any money from anyone. But this airlift carried that story. Then those people made a film, and that film is going round. But obviously, what is his name? Akshay Kumar, the main actor.
Correct, yes.
You can't sort of, compete with him in getting attention. But you have made a very interesting point.
Thank you, Ambassador.
With this, we come to the end of question answer session with Ambassador KP Fabian. Well, we've learned that diplomacy and strategic communication go hand in hand. Thank you so much for your informative insights with your vast experience. It was indeed a delight, Ambassador KP Fabian. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed being with you every moment. All the best to all of you.
Moving on, it's always a privilege for us to listen to the most vibrant journalist and media academician of the country, Professor KG Suresh. Professor Suresh is the Vice Chancellor of Makhanlal Chaturvedi Rashtriya Patrakartiya Vidyalaya. Before this, Professor Suresh served as the Dean of the School of Modern Media, University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, Dehradun. Earlier, he has served as the Director General of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, the country's premier media training institution, and also as a senior consulting editor with the public broadcaster Doordarshan News. Professor Suresh is a member of the Academic Council of the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University, Society of Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, Kolkata, and Research Committee of Indian Council of Social Science Research. Professor Suresh was the editor of Vivek, the strategic journal of Vivekananda International Foundation. He was also the senior fellow with the strategic think tank, VIF. As senior consulting editor with GD News, he had started India First, a defense and strategy-based program. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Kalyan. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, very much.
The Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Talbrez Ahmed, Ambassador Fabian, and all the distinguished panelists. I'm unable to see many of them on the small screen that I have, but I'm sure that all the distinguished, panelists are present. and faculty members, research scholars, and dear friends. I think, Kalyan, I've been given about 20-25 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So first of all, congratulations to you on organizing this very important discussion at a very critical period of our national life. I would like to look at this purely from the Indian perspective because I have worked on that direction only. Perhaps this is one of the, as I said, critical junctures when India is being covered by the whole world. Indian media, global media is looking at India with a lot of interest. And it's not very uncommon to see terms like apocalypse, catastrophe, and all that's, all the words that are being used to describe the current scenario in India post-COVID. To some extent, as somebody who has been in journalism for over 3 decades, I should not be grudging that also because, yes, there is a truth that there is a great tragedy that we are all witnessing in this country. But I would just like to share some thoughts. Last year, around the same time, or maybe 6 months back, we were witnessing more deaths in the United States than the current death rate that we are witnessing in India. I at least don't remember any global media saying Americans are dying, dying, dying. I don't remember reading media reports in US, in Australia, in the West, describing the situation in America as apocalypse. I don't remember. Now, this is not in any way to undermine or to understate what is happening in India. As I myself, I mean, it's globally acknowledged. Yes, there is an immense tragedy that is taking place. But the fact also remains that the inherent prejudice against India, which has been there since time immemorial, I would say, at least post-independence, you have seen India continue to be portrayed as a very poor, backward, superstitious country where it is more the aberrations that make global headlines. And somewhere you see that inherent bias in the current reportage also globally, particularly in the West, which is unfortunate. Given the fact that our population, the American population, is nowhere near the Indian population. I am not at all, trying to play the fiddle when Rome is burning. I accept that yes, there is a tragedy, but given the numbers, the huge population that we have, not just the positivity rate, but also the death rate is comparatively still among the lowest in the world. Given all our, poverty, given all our health condition, the condition of our health infrastructure, the recovery, I would say the recovery rate is far, far higher. So in a nation of 1 billion plus, 138 crore in the last count, we are looking at something like about 4,000 deaths. That is the latest figure. And this is compared to more than 5,000 deaths in a country like the United States, in a developed, advanced country like the United States during the second wave. So what is happening? No doubt that the West is certainly sensationalizing what is happening in India. There are a couple of factors. If you look at some of the reporters, some of those people who are been writing editorials for these Western media is seen. They include people like Arundhati Roy, people like Rana Ayub. So who are the people who are writing, representing India, who have always been critical of at least the present regime? So you don't expect a sympathetic or even an impassioned or even some kind of objective or neutral viewpoint from them. They have always been critical. I mean, that's they have every right to have their own viewpoint. But then, they have always believed in, whether it is their social media handles, you look at it, you will find that they have always shred this government to pieces wherever they could get an opportunity. So when they get an opportunity to write for global papers, certainly yes. The Indian mission in Australia also recently came out with a rejoinder, slamming the reportage as malicious, baseless, and all that, the official statement. But is there a plan? Is there a strategy in place globally for a country which is aspiring to be a global superpower? What is the image that is being seen of Indians gasping for breath, gasping for oxygen? Is that the image that we want to push? We want to show of a resurgent India? So what has happened? Somewhere I believe that, yes, media will continue to write in a certain way. But then you don't see that kind of reportage when it comes to many other countries of the world. And that is because they have a plan. You don't just leave it to civil servants to handle the media. I'm sorry to say, the Honorable Ambassador is also here. The fact is that where are the communication experts? Where are the communication experts in the whole, I mean, in the MEA? I don't see them. Is it enough for foreign service officials who are trained in diplomacy to handle the media? Do you have people who are trained, who are competent enough, capable of putting across India's case, of preparing a blueprint of how to ensure that if not positive coverage, at least you get a balanced coverage so far as your country is concerned and the developments are concerned? You don't see that happening, but you see it happening in the case of many other countries. Why is it that despite the massive outcry over the Wuhan crisis, China continues to be, when it comes to handling China, we don't have a plan? Why is it that when it comes to Pakistan, Pakistan is able to? Now I'm shifting the subject not just to COVID, but beyond the strategic communication overall, because COVID is just a takeoff point. When you look at the Pakistani coverage and the way Pakistan has managed to put across what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir, where are we able to put across in the global media the massive atrocities being perpetrated in Balochistan, in Sindh? We are not able to. You have an entire Baloch movement, but we seem to be on the defensive. A Baloch movement, a Sindhi nationalist movement, which is looking up to India for support. But we don't utter a word, because lest we be seen as interfering, whereas they blatantly talk about what is happening in Kashmir at the drop of a hat. But massive human rights violations in Gilgit, Baltistan, we don't utter a word. There are activists in Canada, in US, in UK. You have the Muttahida Qawmi movement representing the Muhajirs from India who are crying foul over the Punjabi domination in Pakistan and how the other nationalities are being subjugated as second-class citizens. But do we utter a word on those issues? Are we able to present to the world what is happening there? I at least keep seeing so many videos which are coming from there. But our media seems to be least interested in putting those across. Our Mandarins seem to be least interested in highlighting those atrocities. Why are we scared of talking about Tibet when the West is not? They are also dealing with China. But we hardly talk about Tibet. A sizable section of the Tibetan population is today based out of Dharamshala and rest of India. They have made India their second home. Their spiritual and temporal leader is with us. But we don't talk a word. Rather, on the contrary, whenever a Chinese delegation comes to India, our effort is to silence them, to ensure that they are not able to make a voice. Why are we on the defensive? Can any other country have such a powerful tool to ensure that the Chinese don't talk nonsense? They talk about Arunachal Pradesh as South Tibet. They get away with murder. They talk about every part of India. In many parts of India, Northeast India is disputed and get away with murder, and we don't utter the word Tibet from our mouth. What is stopping us from talking about Tibet? Isn't it a fact? Why are we acknowledging? If they are not ready to acknowledge, why are we acknowledging that Tibet is an autonomous region of China? Since when? And that is where the Chinese strategic communication has succeeded, whether it is the South China Sea or the case of One China, Taiwan, you name it, they have been able to sell a narrative across the world about One China. Unfortunately, we have not been able to expose the Chinese potent symbol like the Dalai Lama with us. Still, we have not been able to. So whether it is Pakistan or China, or globally, if you look at it, we have not been able to tell our story. We have not been able to put across our success stories. And the result is that the slumdog millionaires continue to dominate or to represent the image of India, because we have not been able to have a strategic so far as communication is concerned. Perhaps communication has never been integral to our diplomatic policy. And that we have been giving knee-jerk reactions. Whenever something goes wrong, whenever our leaders are attacked, then suddenly we react. But there doesn't seem to be any planning on how to deal with these issues on a long-term basis, how to engage with the global media, how to set up a global narrative. China has set up Confucius centers across the world. India has also set up some Swami Vivekananda Kendras and some other Gandhi centers in some world capitals. But what we end up doing is some Bharatanatyam performances and some Kathak performances and some classical music in the name of soft power. Whereas China has turned them into think tanks to promote academicians, media people intellectuals from those respective countries and to create a lobby within those countries. They have a plan. We don't seem to have a plan at all. We are just going by symbolism. We seem to bank on this that yes, we used to be a cultural, we had culturally influenced a good part of the Asia, and that people love our yoga. So if you are going to sell only yoga and Indian cultural dance, you will only be seen from that perspective. You will never be seen from the modern scientific industrial perspective as a power to reckon with. So it is important that you talk about current issues. You create an intellectual space in those countries. You have a Jewish lobby in the United States, which is so powerful that it can influence legislation in the US Congress and the Senate. We pay hugely for India caucus and stuff like that. But where are the results? I think it is time to look at these things. That are we able to create a lobby within the Western media? This is hard diplomacy. You cannot be saying, oh, they are reporting because it is happening in this country. There's so many things which are happening in the United States. Do we see them get reported? The kind of massive human rights violations that the Americans committed in the Bay of Pigs. How the Americans, how the British, what they did in the Falklands War. Do anyone talk about it? The atrocities in Afghanistan, wherever they have gone. Nobody talks about it. Why? Why is it that India has been suffering, has been at the receiving end of terrorism since the 80s in Kashmir, in Punjab? But that is being seen as insurgency, as extremism. But when the World Trade Center is attacked, it is seen as a global act of terrorism. That is what narrative building is all about. They have been able to dismiss the terrorism in this country as insurgency, as extremism, whereas as left-wing extremism, what is happening in Chhattisgarh and other places. But one attack, one knife attack in some American city is an act of terrorism. How they have defined terrorism. So their terrorism is, as they say, that someone's noise is someone's music, or someone's music is someone's noise. So the violence in our country is just an act of extremism, whereas an act of extremism on their part, on what happens there, is an act of terrorism. And they become the champions of democracy. They talk about democracy. They talk about it's yes, it's real. I'm not at all, as I said, that these problems happen in every country. I can cite you, just name any country and I'll tell you what's happening, you know, to the, I mean, nobody talks about, say, what is happening to the Baha'is in Iran. Nobody is talking about the persecution of Baha'is in Iran. That people are disappearing. People are being put behind the bars. Nobody is talking about that. I'm in touch with the Baha'is across the world. No, nobody talks about it because it's not fashionable. Tell me one country where things are not happening. In Iraq against the Kurds, you just name it. What is happening in Turkey? But so there are incidents. Yes, they are condemnable. Any atrocity on any section of the society is condemnable. But even after Joe Biden had taken over, there have been blatant police brutalities on the blacks in the United States. But is anybody talking about it? In the global narrative, the United States continues to be the champion of democracy and human rights. And we are the worst violators. In the global media rankings, we are pegged at the lowest. Now, these are things that the Indian diplomatic corps, the Indian establishment, strategic establishment should be looking at. So long as they consider that a couple of press release here and there by a minister press or by the MEA spokesperson is good enough, I think that this state of affairs would continue. Strategic communication, unfortunately, we have left it to people who are not competent enough to handle it. India's communication schools should be trained, should be groomed to ensure that communication specialists are prepared. We should not be just every year producing journalists or public relation professionals or advertising professionals. We should be grooming strategic specialists, strategic communicators. Today, the scope of communication has gone beyond journalism. You look at every aspect of life. I have been working with regard to disaster communication, and I have been looking at the disaster communication component at the Special Center for Disaster Communication at Jawaharlal Nehru University. Disasters happen, but worse disasters happen because you are not able to communicate with the people. You are not able to reach out to the people at large. And that is where communication as an integral component of disaster management has to be weaved in. The same holds true for strategic communication. Sorry, I joined the discussion late, but towards the end, I believe Ambassador Fabian was responding to some questions on social media. And any discussion on communication today would be incomplete without referring to social media, because that is where the new age audience is. I have been calling upon governments, requesting them, urging them that you need to incorporate, include media literacy as an integral component of school curriculum. Right from school, students are getting exposed to media like never before. And COVID has ensured that once the mobile phone, which was banned from schools, is today an integral component of education. So you have a huge audience which is getting exposed to social media. Do you have a national media literacy mission in place. And isn't that part of strategic communication? Why is it that today, let us admit and let us confess that today we are a scared country. We wake up with news of death. Our reporting begins from crematoria and cemeteries. Can there be anything, a bigger psychological warfare than this? Our entire spirit stands demoralized today. Why is it that when we look at strategic communication, we look only at the globally, what we can do globally, how globally we are performing, how the global media is looking at us, what global narratives we are looking at. Strategic communication is equally applicable at home. What is the kind of confidence that your people have? The morale of your people. It was perhaps never at the lowest ebb that we see today. The morale of the Indian people is down. We are every day hoping against hope that death won't knock at your doors. Why? Where have we failed in setting the narrative? We need to look at it. As a nation, we need to talk about it. And this is being perpetuated, this whole scenario. Across the world, people are only, when we are doing it, it is being repeated ad nauseum by the global media also. It's a reflection. They look at the Indian media, how it is reporting it. I'm not saying, again, that we should not criticize the government of the day, the governments of the day, state, central. No. But we are also a nation. We are also a people. We are also a country. How are we responding? Are we responding with fear? How are we responding to the emerging situation? Is it the media's job only to inform, or is it also to educate and inspire? That is something we need to look at. Where is the job that we are doing of inspiring a country to come out against this, to create a movement that we will not allow this to happen? Why is it that we are looking at governments to impose lockdowns, and why we can't go for self-lockdowns? Why? Who will do it? Why are we expecting everything to be done by state and central governments? We say they allowed, the Kumbh to happen. But why did we as a people have to go to the Kumbh? Who should have spoken about it? Somebody allows a murder to happen and we'll go and get ourselves slaughtered there. I mean, this is nonsense. We have got into a habit of blaming governments for everything, state or central. As a people in a democracy, we don't have any responsibility. Intellectuals, they don't have a responsibility. Strategic community, they don't have a responsibility. I think we should be talking about these also. I don't know, Kalyan, whether I have crossed the time limit that has been given to me, but it's always a pleasure to be addressing the faculty at GDGU, one of the premier universities of the country. I would have loved to be there personally and interact with each and every faculty member, but God willing, sooner we will get that opportunity. But thank you, Kalyan. If there are some questions, I would be happy to take them.
There are a few questions.
Thank you.
Dr. Sarika?
Yes, sir. A very good morning, sir. Firstly, a very informative and energetic information you have given, and your lecture was so motivating. And I'm a big fan of your working style as well. So I feel very lucky to have your session in front of me. So, sir, I would like to ask a question that is it right to show deaths and mourning sounds in electronic media package to gain TRP? And what should be the moral duty of an electronic media channel at the time of this crisis and pandemic? As a journalist, what should our moral duties?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sarika.
Yes, sir.
I, I think that, no doubt we have to inform what is happening. That's part of our job as media. But I think in this situation, we should also be preparing the society to face this situation. Are we doing that? How many channels are talking to doctors, experts, how to protect yourself? How many channels are talking? Don't we have, communication is all about IEC, information, education, communication. Is it only our job to sensationalize? Or we also, or only TRP ratings? I mean, why we don't start a campaign? How many channels have engaged? Some have, but that was at a very muted level. How many of us, all these months, when this COVID was happening, elections were happening, we were limping back to normalcy. How many of them kept warning us? In fact, they were promoting all festivals like anything. They were promoting all kinds of events. That was what they were doing. Wasn't the second wave in the coming? If the second wave wreaked havoc in Europe and the West, in America, in Canada, how did you ever think that it would never come to India?
Right.
Was there a magic wand? We didn't have a magic wand. After the first wave, we started limping back to normalcy as if nothing has happened and nothing is going to happen. COVID has disappeared from this country. Shouldn't we have prepared our country? If there are earthquakes happening, don't you think it is our responsibility to teach our citizens how to save their lives? Or will we wait for the governments to save the lives? If there is a pandemic happening, I think we should be preparing our citizens for that. Media has an important role in that. And that is also part of internal strategic communication.
Right.
And that is something that we need to talk about in this country. In our media schools, we are not talking about this. We have a social responsibility. Our responsibility is not just to criticize government and put all the blame on themselves. We have a responsibility of creating awareness, of awakening the people. That is also part of our job. Yes, let us criticize the government where it is due. But we also need to awaken the conscience of the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Shivam Jha, followed by Madam Preeti and Swarnendu.
Good afternoon, sir. Good morning, sir. Sorry, it's still 11 a.m. Sir, can I ask my question?
Yes, please.
Sir, as media being the fourth pillar of democracy, if we don't report on the people dying in enormous numbers, oxygen not being there, isn't it a crime against humanity itself? And sir, second thing, I wanted to correct you on that. While Trump was president, there was a daily death counter on CNN and many other news outlets in USA. that were reporting deaths. If the UP government itself has said कि कोई भी मतलब ये सब करेगा on social media to ask for help, उनके against action लिया जाएगा. And there was a child whose dada got infected, and he posted on Facebook कि he needs oxygen, I need help, and there was a police report against him. So if the government is the morally collapsed, I think it's the role of media to play, be it Rana Ayub or any other journalist who's reporting on the ground is very much important, because 100 journalists have died and over 45 of them were in the last 2 months itself. And then NDTV also on a daily basis interacted with doctors. That's one channel I've seen. And on Feb 28th itself, Maharashtra said, people of Maharashtra, the science department said that there's a new surge coming. Please do something. Please maintain social distancing. So it wasn't there. The thing was, the government of the day ignored everything. And I think they should be held responsible. And especially the health minister should resign for promoting Ayush and things like that.
Okay, Shivam, thank you for that question, but I don't think that you listened to me properly because I consistently, right from the word go, said that we should criticize the government wherever it is relevant. I did not say don't criticize the government. I'm talking about global narratives. You are referring to some exceptions here and there. Somebody warned that there is a surge coming. But where was the general narrative on the surge coming? There was no general narrative on the surge coming. Governments did not respond. Yes, attack them, left, right, and center. But I am saying that as communicators, we also have a responsibility of creating awareness in the society. Let us not blame only governments. This is something that we are getting into as a habit. That, okay, something happens, we blame the government of the day and we get away with it, that we have nothing to do with it. We as a people also have a responsibility. If we are saying that if political parties are fielding people on caste lines to contest elections, you and I are responsible for electing them to power. And you and I cannot get away with that. You and I look at that of a candidate, the caste of a candidate, and why is it that that they are doing it? The political parties will change if the change comes from within. Who will create that awareness? Who will talk about these issues? How many newspapers report when election comes about each and every candidate? How many newspapers and news channels analyze the performance of political parties vis-a-vis their manifestos which were announced in the last elections? Anyway, it's a long debate. I don't want to get into that. Let us not run away from our responsibilities. I do agree. I'm not at all saying that, if there is no, please report it extensively. But what is the narrative that you are going to set in the country? Are you going to say, imagine your parents come home and are all the time saying that we have failed as a family, we have failed as a, so there is nothing going to happen, everything is devastated, we are all going to die. If this is the narrative that's going to be in your home, what is the kind of morale that you are going to have? I think that I should also be motivating my people that yes, government has failed, but we are not going to fail as a nation. Governments and nations are different. We as a people are not going to be defeated. We have to overcome this. And that's what the people of Japan did after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They emerged back. They came back, not because of governments. The people, the resilience of the people will have to be reawakened. You cannot demoralize a whole people, You have to tell people. I mean, who is discussing? We are saying that yes, remdesivir is being sold in black. But how many discussions have you seen on how as a society we have degraded over the years? We have just become a profit-seeking society where we tend to make profit even in death. How oxygens are being sold in the black in Noida and Greater Noida. You know, even today it is available. For a 4,800 cylinder, rupees 800 cylinder, about 8,500 is being charged. That's what the Times Now undercover reporters found out. How many discussions on that moral default of that decline that is happening as a society? That we tend to profiteer out of deaths also. Don't you think we should be looking at our society also? What is happening to our society? Or we only talk about governments? That is my question. Simple. Next question.
Yes. Good morning, sir. I'm Preeti Surya. I'm a PhD scholar with Dr. Amresh. Thank you for such inspiring perspectives on the things as they stand today, and compliments for the conviction you made your points with. My question now is, what kind of communication strategy on part of Indian media can correct the information news imbalance in the West? India continues to be acknowledged for slumdog millionaires and little else in the Western media. How can this be corrected?
You see, there has to be a strategic policy in place, a strategic communication policy in place, which has to be manned by strategic communicators, not bureaucrats, not diplomats, but by communication specialists like you and me. Youngsters who are present here, people like Shivam Jha, professors like Kalyan and Ram Kinkar Singh who are present here. Let them be given the charge of dealing with or of setting up a global narrative. Yes, we have problems. Who doesn't have problems? Are we the only society with problems? But we are also a resurgent society, a diverse nation, a rainbow nation with a rich history. Isn't that to be talked about? We have a people who are competent to do the best in the world. So let us not be, as a nation, be judged by the actions, the inactions of our government. The American people are globally looked at from a different perspective. We should be looking at the Indian people. Why every exercise has to be looked at necessarily from the prism of governments? Governments will come and go. And as a people, what is the narrative that we are setting up? Are we looking at still India as a land of snake charmers?
Absolutely, absolutely.
That is what we have to look at. Whether it is Mr. Modi or Mr. Gandhi, it doesn't matter in the long run. When I go and land in a European airport, it is my blue passport which is going to define me, not the government in power.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this.
Mr. Swanendu, please go ahead with your question.
Swanendu, please unmute yourself.
Your microphone.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
At the outset, thank you so much for your passionate views, sir. I'm Swarnendu. I'm a research scholar with GDGU University. So in the world of social media today, at times, tactical incidents have strategic implications. In your view, what should be the plan to have your organization strategic communication in place while these incidents are managed? Thank you, sir.
Are you talking about governments, or are you talking about the social media as a whole, what is happening in the society?
I am talking about incidents for the government or of the government that are being used by social media and portrayed, sir. what you were talking about, the narrative creation. So at times the tactical incidents do have strategic implications, sir.
Yes.
So about that,
I do agree. You see, as earlier mentioned by Ambassador Fabian, social media cannot be controlled and should not be controlled also. So I am all for regulation, but not for control. There's a difference between regulation and control, but what is happening,
yes.
Swarnendu, let us look at the farmer protests. I don't know whether you studied that, since you seem to be interested in this subject.
Sir.
A lot of handles were being operated from Pakistan. If you are into strategic communication, then you would have certainly studied.
Yes.
So let us also, some of us tend to believe that social media is just a very natural outpouring of sentiments and feelings. No, a lot of it is manufactured.
True.
And they are manufactured from across the border.
Yes.
There are global players involved in manufacturing that narrative.
Yes.
That is something that we tend to forget while defending social media.
Yes.
That is something that we have to look at as a society, as governments. We also have a responsibility. It's not just the governments of the day, because ultimately the narrative is about us as a nation.
Yes.
We will be judged globally on the basis of those narratives which are being set.
Totally with you.
So that is something that we need to understand. This entire misconception that a lot of youngsters have, who are certainly, yes, very correctly so, they are defending the freedom of right to speech and expression. I'm totally with them on that. But all that glitters is not gold. All that they see on the social media is not a natural outpouring by Indian citizens, but a lot of it is being orchestrated, generated, planned, planted by our friends from across the borders.
Yes.
That also
yes.
we need to remember.
Yes, sir. And probably with the right to that social media, we should, as youngsters or as people of this country, understand the duty that we have.
Swarnendu, that is why I talked about media literacy mission.
Totally with you, sir.
We need to make our people media literate. Unless we do that,
yes. Thank you so much.
Teach them to learn, distinguish between what is spontaneous and what is orchestrated.
Totally with you. Totally with you. Thank you so much for your views, sir. Thank you. Grateful.
We have one last question coming in from Dr. Nirvana. Dr. Nirvana, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you very much, Professor Suresh. I'm joining from Cape Town in South Africa. And I wanted to thank you for your presentation, your speech, and to concur with the fact from the point of view of a diaspora that, yes, there is indeed a global, the failure of the global narrative, because we as diaspora feel very connected to India, but we are being told all of the time by your representatives in our countries that you must not be connected to India. We want to learn Hindi, we want to learn Kathak. We ask our consulates all of the time for this, with no response. They give us some sort of a textbook reply from a book that's outdated. And it sort of reinforces the feeling that, don't be interested. We can help our motherland so much, especially in the crisis, if there was a concerted communication strategy and an effort to unite us in the other countries, your global citizens. We can help you through COVID-19. There is so many things we can do outside of India for India, but it is not being encouraged.
Thank you for that perspective. I think that that's a very important perspective. We have never looked at the diaspora as a force multiplier in our strategic communication. I think that the diaspora can really play a very critical role as a force multiplier in strategic communication. Because if they are on board with you, they are holding not only key influential positions in their respective countries, They are hugely respected, and they represent not the underprivileged, downtrodden, backward, undernourished, malnourished India, but they represent a successful community, a global community, which has become a role model in their own respective countries. And when the diaspora speaks, people listen with respect. And I think that is a potential that remains hugely untapped. And that is where the success of our diplomacy would be, in tapping that huge potential. I'm sure sooner or later they will realize that the mistake that they are committing by ignoring this huge potential they have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure if we switch on all of our cameras, I'm sure most of our faces are lit with the light of knowledge today. I'm definitely falling short of words to express my gratitude to you for the words spoken. It was truly a food for thought for all of us, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Moving ahead, when we were looking for a journalist who can connect media research with strategic communication, the only name which came to us was Dr. Birendra Chaudhary. He is not only News K Chaudhary, but also Research K Chaudhary. Dr. Birendra Chaudhary is the editor of the Times Now news channel. He is a PhD in international studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University and has served as a research head and senior correspondent with India's leading news networks. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Namaskar. Thank you so much. First of all, I must tell you to all of you, GD GOENKA University, Vice Chancellor, GD GOENKA University, and all faculty members. In fact, I must tell you, at the same time, we are in the process of conference with our channel as well. Why I am mentioning this? Tomorrow we have a counting for 5 state assembly elections. At the same time, the pandemic. So we are going to take a very, very crucial decision. Right now, I cannot disclose, but certainly that decision will say a lot of message about our people, about our state, about our country. Now, coming to the subject, I have to mention 2 things. How this pandemic has re-emphasized the role of electronic media and social media. I will give you 2 examples for social media. First, I will mention some dates. You can recall April 16, Serum Institute CEO Adar Poonawalla tweets, and that tweet is for American administration. And he requests, why don't you lift the embargo on raw materials related to vaccine? April 16, that is on social media, on his Twitter account. US response comes on April 23rd. US State Department, a spokesperson, responds to a question by journalist. Exact line is, first obligation is to American, says American White House spokesperson. See the dynamics of what I am trying to say, the how social media that we represent, including obviously electronic media, that I will come to later. On April 25th, there is a hotline discussion or talks between NSA of India and NSA of America. And American administration realizes how they have given the statement that backfired across the world. The first American, no others. However, we all know India has supplied vaccines around 100 countries. And particularly the African countries, the Asian countries, they are poor, they cannot afford. But American response, see the American response on India's pandemic, that is almost crossed all limits. Next day, come to the next day, that is April 26. Kamala Harris, US Vice President, she tweets, the US is working closely with the Indian government to rapidly deploy additional support and supplies to India. Just after a few minutes, you see the tweet of US President Joe Biden. That is very touchy. You can recall President Trump and Narendra Modi's last year. US President Joe Biden says, just as India sent assistance to the United States as over hospitals were strained early in the pandemic, we are determined to help India in its time of crisis. Why I am mentioning all these things? The role of social media, that a story begins on April 26, and that finally come to the conclusion, US administration, the how much pressure they have had to suffer across the world, saying that we won't lift embargo on India. And purely, I should say, the role of social media, how it has worked, how it has influenced the policymakers of US. Second example. Now we should come to the domestic front. We all know our pandemic situation has crossed. Every day you see, today we have crossed 4 lakh plus cases on top of the world. We are facing 3,500 deaths even yesterday. Every day we watch in television, newspaper, social media, so many casualties. We have in our Times Now group, we have lost a colleague. Still there are almost 50, 60 are suffering from COVID. So how, again, I'm coming to the point, how the social media is helping. As we have discussed, I was watching previous speaker, Suresh ji, we both are very close each other for several years. How the machinery, the system has failed. I'm not blaming any government or any minister or anybody else, but our system has failed. We must admit, in this failure of system, what is happening? I'm giving you my own example. Almost every day I get a phone call कि वीरेंद्र भाई एक ट्वीट कर देंगे, सारा इंफॉर्मेशन मैं आपको भेज रहा हूं, आप ट्वीट कर दीजिए, बनारस में ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिल रहा है हमें पेशेंट को, किसी को ये दवा नहीं मिल रहा है, किसी ने फोन किया तो आप भी रीट्वीट कर दीजिए मेरे ट्वीट को और रवीश जी को थोड़ा बोल दीजिए, वो भी कर देंगे। बोले इससे क्या है? तो बोले कि देखिए हम किसको बोले, आप लोग जो ट्वीट करते हैं तो इस पर क्या होता है कि हमको रिस्पांस मिलता है, हमारे पेशेंट को फायदा हुआ है, हमारे पेशेंट को सिलेंडर मिल गया है, हमारे पेशेंट को, तो सी द सिग्निफिकेंस, द पावर ऑफ सोशल मीडिया। Yesterday I got a mail, a phone from my colleague. They were saying that thank you so much. So these two examples explains us the how important role is playing our social media. Now I coming to the Times Now news channel. Somebody mentions in your discussion that NDTV. If you are watching Times Now, event today, that decision I have not disclosed to you. Today, tomorrow you will see the result of Times Now. This is very difficult. For last several days, we are focusing on only COVID because that is our every household's problem. We are weeping every day. We are losing our friends. We are losing our family members. So when matter comes on the society or the family or the dear one, obviously that is the topmost agenda. And that should be the agenda. And we are doing that. Like I will give you an example. Like some questions were in the previous Suresh's debate or lecture. Sensational. You know, I do admit there are some sensationalism, but you can at the same time recall the story from Prince's story, almost 8, 10 years, 13 years ago. Whenever we think that is a people's related story, we never hesitate to criticize any government. For that matter, I can give you an example. Even today, you can see how we are attacking directly to the government. What government is doing? Why don't we have oxygen? Why our hospital system has failed? Why our government is saying this such statement? Every day you can watch. Yes, I can admit sensationalism. There are some, but I cannot say the channel, and particularly for Times Now, I can say we are one of the top channels of the country. We always, in fact, we try to connect to the audiences. You say whatever you say. We never censor. Even in debate, there are criticism. There are pro-government, there are anti-government. You must have watched. So for this thing, I must say that we are not biased. Yes, we are biased. We are biased for the people of our country, society of our country, for the sake of our country. Whenever matter comes to the national interest, we never hesitate to defend our national interest, and that we will continue. At the same time, we are critical. We criticize the system as we are doing today, and tomorrow you are going to see. And we are going to take a tough decision whether we should do election or not, because we have been very critical. The way campaigning were happening in Bengal or gatherings, we can minimize. Now we are facing, just today, one of our stories is that now we are going to face the volcanic situation in West Bengal because of all rallies. And we cannot blame one party. All parties are responsible. Even Election Commission. Once, a few days back, I tweeted that if you want to understand the election process of India, you have to understand the TN session. Because Election Commission has full authority. You know clearly, once election is declared, in that case, Election Commission becomes the service server. And that has been shown by TN session. And we have been mentioning all these things. We have been critical for all these unnecessary gatherings. We can minimize because pandemic is very dangerous. Pandemic is very serious. Pandemic, Corona never hesitates to touch anyone. Now even the situation has crossed the all limit. Now the target is happening young boys, young girls. Yesterday we lost a colleague from Aztec, young dynamic colleague. So I think media's role, and finally I will say that television, you must have seen the reach of news channel has reached immensely because people wants to see, people wants to listen, people wants to watch what is happening in the country. Because we saw you always through the channel across the country. What is happening in Indore? What is happening in Bhopal? What is happening in Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh? And due to that reason, the media person, the reporters, the desks are suffering heavily. You can't believe in Times Now, 102 persons are suffering from Corona. One guy we have lost. due to corona. Several colleagues of mine is in a hospital. Why? Because of coverage. Because we have to go to the field. Now management has decided to minimize. So this pandemic has given a great lesson to the society, including students, including faculties, including media, all institutions. And we should not be totally pessimistic as well, because this has given us some opportunity as well, as we are interacting with you. Suppose in normal situation, I would not have been in a position to go to your university. But thanks to Mr. Jha, Dr. Jha, he persuaded me, नहीं, आप घर से भी कर सकते हैं, because tomorrow is election. So on another line, I am on the conference with my office. And at the same time, I am interacting, because this is also our duty to interact with you. But believe me, trust me, channel, I am representing Times Now. Certainly, I am one of the, I'm not saying I take all decision alone, but obviously we have a core team that always think, and they are like you, they are like me, because we are also concerned about the situation. And I do hope if you have any questions, you can ask me and I will try to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. There is one question which has come in the chat box. I'll read it out for you. Is political leadership dominant in India compared to communicative leadership of the media? What's the way out?
Pardon, can you repeat the questions?
Yes, sir. Is political leadership dominant in India compared to communicative leadership of the media? What's the way out?
See, this is a very good question. Good questions means, I did my PhD in JNU, and subject was media. Media means the response of media on the Pokhran 2 test. So during that process, I read freedom movement's media's performance. So there was some pressure. You can't believe. In fact, मैं आपको ये कहूँ, गणेश शंकर विद्यार्थी एक ऐसे पत्रकार हुए जो अपने जान गंवा दिए। लेकिन कहा जाता था उस समय कि अंग्रेजी अखबार प्रो सिस्टम होता है और वर्नाकुलर अखबार एंटी सिस्टम होता है। माने ये कि अंग्रेजी अखबार पे दबाव होता है ज्यादा और वो मान जाते हैं, और हिंदी अखबार में वो मानते नहीं। परिणाम ये होता है कि जितने भी रिवोल्यूशनरी आप जर्नलिस्ट कम लीडर देखेंगे, वर्नाकुलर से ही आते थे। हम हिंदी की सिर्फ बात नहीं कर रहे, बांग्ला की भी बात कर रहे हैं, उड़िया की भी बात कर रहे हैं। तो ये वहां पर था। आज भी दबाव होता है, लेकिन I cannot say we work under dabav all the time. Like I am saying, we are less covering election, and majority of the coverage goes to pandemic. You can think if there would have been a pressure or dabav, situation would have been different or reverse. Even tomorrow, certainly our top priority will be our people, our society. So there are some pressures. I cannot say that is not, but that does not mean all decisions we take some under pressure. Never, never. Otherwise, we would not have criticized Uttar Pradesh government, because our channel's headquarters is in Noida. We would not criticize several ruling governments across the country on several issues, like fuel price. We are very critical. And you can understand to whom we are criticizing. But we never agitate.
Preeti, you can go ahead with the question.
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, sir. I am a media scholar with the GDGU. My question is, are the media channels holding the government accountable for lack of preparedness for the second wave? I repeat my question. Are the media channels holding the government accountable for lack of preparedness for the second wave?
Yes. See, we are doing that because there is a point in this question itself. Last year, when this pandemic started, our Prime Minister took several decisions, and that decisions have been criticized by opposition parties. Tali bajana, right? But we don't criticize that steps because the purpose of Prime Minister Narendra Modi was to make awareness in the society, because we must admit nobody knows about this disease, this pandemic. We have spoken hundreds of doctors of the India or across the world, US doctor, British doctor, German doctor, Indian doctors. Do you know what we are using medicines?
Yeah.
Do we have any particular medicine which can cure? No cure. Just we are trying. Even that vaccine is not like polio, we have a vaccine. Or several pregnant mothers, we give the vaccines. But for this vaccine, just we are trying to save or trying to increase the immune system. That vaccine is not for any COVID. Believe me, that is not going to cure us. But what that vaccine will do, that will increase our systems, the system. So last time, government, Modi, Prime Minister, did actually fantastic job. You can criticize, but that was a great awareness, plus national lockdown. But this time, both the things are there. Nobody, even if you ask me, even I did not expect the spread will be like this, like fire. Every day, today it has crossed 4 lakh. That is the highest in the world. Tomorrow what will happen, we don't know.
No.
The person, the lady doctor, senior scientist in America, she was saying the mid-May would be the devastating phase.
Yes.
So we cannot blame government totally, but at the same time, we criticize government because the final authority lies with the government. Who will take decision? Suppose आपको गुस्सा चढ़ेगा तो गुस्सा चढ़ के आप क्या कर सकते हैं? अपने छात्रों को डांट सकते हैं, हम अपने छात्रों को डांट सकते हैं, अपने दोस्त को डांट सकते हैं, झगड़ा कर लेंगे, लेकिन अथॉरिटी तो नहीं है ना हमारे पास. अथॉरिटी तो सरकार के पास है ना. आपको तो निर्णय लेना पड़ेगा ना. हम ब्लेम तो आप ही को करेंगे ना. हम किसको ब्लेम करेंगे? मोदी जी बहुत पावरफुल लीडर है. मैं रात को अपने कॉलीग से पद्मजा से यही बात कर रहा था कि मोदी जी इतने पावरफुल लीडर है कि ही कैन डू एनीथिंग, एंड ही हैज टू, बिकॉज यू आर लाइक अ स्टेट्समैन, यू आर अ मैन ऑफ डिसीजन टेकिंग. आप डिसीजन लेने वाले प्राइम मिनिस्टर हो. आपने दिखाया है दुनिया को, देश को दिखाया है कि हम डिसीजन लेते हैं. जो टफ डिसीजन लेता है वही अच्छा मैनेजर माना जाता है, चाहे कॉर्पोरेट वर्ल्ड में हो चाहे वो पॉलिटिकल वर्ल्ड में हो. तो हमें थोड़ी बात तो है सरकार से कि सरकार को थोड़ा और टफ होना चाहिए था. देखिए हम तो देश के नागरिक हैं ना, थोड़ा हम बहक जाते हैं. हम ऐसा नहीं कहते कि हमारी भी गलती है. जब फरवरी में जनवरी में पेंडेमिक लगा कि हम लोग इतना सेलिब्रेट करने लगे कि हम लोग यहाँ जा रहे हैं वहां जा रहे हैं, इधर जा रहे हैं उधर जा रहे हैं, इंक्लूडिंग माई सेल्फ. मेरी पत्नी कह रही थी कि हम लोग इतना फ्री हो गए थे, लगा था कि कोरोना खत्म हो गया. और सरकार के कुछ मंत्री हैं, they were also saying like this, नहीं अब तो गया. और unfortunately I will tell you, really I'm very sorry, UP minister, he was joking, and do you know what happened? Unfortunately he died by corona, and he was joking corona. अरे कुछ नहीं है, ऐसे नहीं है, वैसे नहीं है. तो कहने का मतलब है कि सरकार, जिम्मेदारी तो सरकार को देना ही पड़ेगा हमें. यदि हम उनको वाहवाही दे रहे हैं कि आप बहुत बड़े नेता हैं, आप बहुत अच्छा काम करते हैं, तो क्या हम बुराई की बात तो उनको ही कहेंगे ना. तो फाइनली माय वन लाइनर इज दैट वी कैनॉट से कि गवर्नमेंट इज नॉट रिस्पॉन्सिबल. गवर्नमेंट है क्योंकि सरकार को ही सब कुछ करना है. अभी भी आपको करना पड़ेगा, जगना पड़ेगा, नहीं तो बहुत ही बुरा हाल इंडिया का हो रहा है. यू कैन सी द सिचुएशन इन दिल्ली.
Yeah, true, sir. It's out of hand, almost out of hand. And particularly with Kumbh, I mean, my major concern was कि Kumbh जैसे इवेंट्स ऑर्गेनाइज किए गए इन हालात में, और जब हम जानते थे कि सेकेंड वेव वेस्टर्न नेशंस में आई हैं, और फिर हम लोगों ने, सरकारों ने ऐसी कैसे अनुमति दे दी?
बिल्कुल, कुंभ है, इलेक्शन रैलीज है, आप लाखों लाख लोगों को बुला लेते हो।
बिल्कुल,
और इस कुंभ के मामले में सरकार की सीधे गलती है। रैलीज के मामले में, इलेक्शन के मामले में टोटली आई थिंक रिस्पांसिबल इज इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया।
Absolutely, absolutely.
You have authority. Nobody can challenge. During election, 5 state election commission was the supreme boss for 5 state. State government had zero power. Central government had zero power. But you did not take the decision.
Thank you, sir.
And now West Bengal is going to become a volcanic state.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yes, any question?
With this, we come to an end of our question answer round with Dr. Virendra Chaudhary. Sir, thank you for taking us through the journey of strategic communication in media and news. You truly are an inspiration to anyone aspiring to be a journalist, and for those who are already in the field, I'm sure you are a role model to all of them. I wholeheartedly thank you for the insights you've shared on various fronts. It was indeed a great pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Namaskar, giving me this opportunity. To all of you again, thank you so much. All the best.
Moving on, we have Mr. Ashok Bagaria. Mr. Ashok Bagaria is a journalist with over 20 years of experience in print, television, and digital media. Presently working as legal editor TV9, formerly worked as legal editor Hindustan Times and CNN IBN. Have reported on range of issues pertaining to law, policy, and politics. He's also teaching media laws on as the adjunct faculty at Jindal Law University. Sir, over to you.
Well, first of all, very good morning to all of you, to the Vice Chancellor, to Dr. Amresh Jha, to all my colleagues in the School of Communication. I see all of them here on the screen. I also wish to start this talk with a small rider that please keep safe, stay healthy, don't venture out, because these are very difficult times that we are going through. And today's topic that I'm going to speak on is about the role of judiciary and COVID. So before I launch in, I just want to place before you the magnitude of the problem we are facing. In fact, just before me, Mr. Virendra Chaudhary did point out to the magnitude of the problem. And in fact, I would just like to add to what he said, that what we are facing today is not just the second wave. In fact, it's a tsunami that has wrecked the lives of millions of people in this country. As far as the COVID figures for today are concerned, what we saw today was the numbers crossed 4 lakh. 4 lakh new cases on a daily basis. Another thing, today is the last day of April, and the data for the month of April has come, and it shows that we have had 69 lakh infections just in the last 1 month, which again is a global high. So what I really want to say is that with over 19 lakh confirmed cases of COVID, India accounts for nearly half of all the new cases globally. So just I'm trying to, when I say or reel out these figures, what I'm trying to do is provide you with some kind of a scale where you can measure the magnitude of the problem which is facing us. Every day, 4 lakh cases are being reported in the country. As far as the official death toll is concerned, we have crossed the 2 lakh figure mark. And what we are witnessing on a daily basis is about 2,000 deaths every day. Now, this particular pandemic has actually thrown the country into an emergency mode. Now, what we are witnessing is a state of medical emergency that we as a nation have never ever seen before. We have had situations like war emergencies. We have witnessed emergencies pertaining to internal disturbances of the 1977 variety. But besides that, a medical emergency, we have never seen it. And what we are witnessing today is really very distressing, disturbing, and mind-numbing. The media, the newspapers, the television channels, and the digital platforms, what they have been beaming into our homes are visuals of people literally dying on pavements, in their cars. There's no oxygen supply in the country. There is lack of medical infrastructure. There are no medicines, no proper treatment, no guidance, and nothing. And if I can put it in another way, is that what this country at this point in time is facing a lack of oxygen, and that lack of oxygen is not just for the citizens of this country, but there is also a lack of oxygen for the democracy as a whole. And in these trying times, for the first time, I'll say with a sense of responsibility that it's for the first time that the judiciary has risen to the occasion and is pumping in this oxygen into the lives of our citizens and the democracy and the nation as a whole. It all started in March 2020 when we witnessed that this pandemic unfold globally. The whole world was caught unawares, and we were not even sure of our responses as to how we would deal with it. And that point in time, the central government imposed a total lockdown to prevent the spread of this particular disease. During that lockdown, what we witnessed was a very unprecedented situation of migrant laborers. The migration of laborers from urban centers to their homes. And the situation at that point in time was so pathetic. I will use the word pathetic because there was no mode of transport available. The country was in a state of lockdown. People were walking on the highways, trying to reach their homes. There have been stories where people have walked for months to reach their homes. People started walking from Mumbai, people started walking from Bangalore, took whatever mode of transport was available. When it was not available, they walked to their places, native places in Odisha, Bihar, Bengal. But this time around, the situation has become more grave. It has become more grave because this time around, the pandemic has hit people like you and me. The pandemic, the virus, has climbed the social ladder because last time, the people who suffered were the poor. But this time around, the situation is that the middle class, the upper middle class, and the upper class, I would say, has been impacted very deeply by this virus. We see all around us that people are dying. I have lost friends. I have lost acquaintances in this pandemic. In the Supreme Court itself, I have lost 4 advocate friends. Yesterday, we lost the former Attorney General of India, Mr. Soli Sorabji, who I have known for the last 20 years. Again, we lost a sitting judge, Justice Shantanu Gowdur. although it's been said that he died because of a long illness, but that illness which he had was given a trigger by this COVID pandemic. So coming back to the main point of the role of judiciary and how it has risen to the occasion, and when I say the role of judiciary in times of COVID pandemic, I'm also going to touch on the slightly contentious topic of what the government has done, especially in the last 3-4 months, to tide over this pandemic. So it all starts almost a month back when courts across the country, when I say courts across the country, I emphasize that it is the high courts which started the trend of taking cognizance of issues affecting the common people. Local media have been reporting stories on lack of oxygen, lack of medical infrastructure, lack of drugs, remdesivir, black marketing of medicines, which could help those afflicted. Now it is in this backdrop that the high courts started taking cognizance. Now when the high court started taking cognizance and pulling up the state governments as to what they're doing, what emerged was that there was a gaping hole in the response of the state governments to this pandemic. The state governments did not have any policy plans in place. They had no emergency measures which were in place. They were dealing with the situation on an ad hoc basis. And this was very disturbing, which forced the high courts to pass a slew of orders wherein they directed state governments to ensure that there is a regular supply of oxygen, ramping up the production and supply of drugs and oxygen, and also passing various guidelines as to how, in a better way, the state government can handle the issue. Initially, the matter also came to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, for various reasons, did not take cognizance of it. However, 2 weeks back, the Supreme Court on its own motion took note of this situation, and a general perception was created in the minds of people that possibly the government is holding hands with the central government and wants to de-escalate the situation and to call to the Supreme Court all the cases that are pending in the high courts. Now, what has been happening in the high courts is, let me give you a few examples. Let's take the example of the Madras High Court. The Madras High Court has taken very strong note of the issue of elections being conducted during the times of COVID pandemic. Now, in the last 2 months, we have seen that our institutions have failed us. Election Commission, the judiciary, and even the elected government has failed the citizenry of this country. But with time, they have risen to the occasion. And when I say risen to the occasion, I'm only speaking for the judiciary. I'm still yet to see any kind of some concrete or affirmative or hopeful measure being taken by the central government. What happened when these elections were carried out in these 4 states and 1 union territory of Puducherry was that we saw the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, and various union cabinet ministers conducting rallies where over 2 lakh, 3 lakh people had gathered, all cramped into a small ground. No COVID protocol was being followed. Nobody was wearing a mask. And it was really surprising that as the head of the state, the Prime Minister of the country did not rise to the occasion then and tell people that, boss, guys, countrymen, you have to take care. Elections can come in later. Today, it is a fight against this pandemic where we have to win. Wins and losses in elections happen. But no such response was seen from the central leadership, or even for that matter, the state leadership. I don't just blame the central government, even the state political parties, state governments. They all very enthusiastically took part in this election process. And a similar election process was witnessed last year too in the state of Bihar. And I have first-hand experience of the elections in Bihar because I had covered them. And what I witnessed there in the ground in the month of September and October was that people were discussing that there's no such disease called corona. There was no masking up. Nobody was afraid of this pandemic. And it was just kind of a given. People had given into their fate that if it has to happen, it will happen. If it doesn't have to happen, it will not happen. Now, in this backdrop, elections were conducted in Bihar, successfully conducted, results were declared. But this time around, the situation was a little difficult and a different one. Here, the Madras High Court took cognizance of the issue that the way the elections were conducted, and they were more concerned about what is going to happen tomorrow. That is the 2nd of May when the counting happens. And the Madras High Court went on to make a very strong observation, and the Madras High Court even went to the extent of calling the Election Commission officials murderers. And the Madras High Court said, why should the Election Commission officials not be hauled up for murder? Because people were dying because of this pandemic. Similarly, in Gujarat High Court takes up the matter. Hearings are conducted for almost 8 or 9 hours at a stretch. State authorities are called in the courtroom to answer as to what is happening, what measures are being put in place. And let me point out that I have been a part of these hearings, and what I have witnessed is that the state response has been lacking. They have no plan in place, nothing. Now, everybody says that we have been hit by an unprecedented situation, a tsunami. I agree with it. We were not prepared, but we can plan. We can plan how to deal with the aftermath of the situation. Visuals are beamed into our homes of cremation grounds, where the cremation grounds and burial grounds are working 24/7. People are being cremated. Even there is a waiting of almost 12 to 14 hours even to get your loved ones cremated or buried. The situation is really bad. There's no oxygen supply in the state of Delhi, in the National Capital Region of Delhi. The Delhi High Court pulls up the Delhi government and the central government as to what is happening. Why is there no oxygen? And even at times like this, there is some sort of a political bickering which takes place in the courtroom. Blame is transferred. Delhi government says it's the central government which is responsible. The central government says there's sufficient oxygen in the country, but the Delhi government does not have tankers to pick up the allocated oxygen supply that is being given to them. Hospitals join in the chorus saying that we don't know where do we procure oxygen from. And while all this is happening, the central government decides that this is the time that they have to step in. They decide that now from here on, what will happen is that all oxygen from all sources in the country will come into a central pool and then will be distributed to the state governments. Now, again, after this particular arrangement was made, we've seen in the courts, again, state governments bickering, saying that I need to be allocated certain quantity of oxygen, which I am not being given, but there are other states which need lesser oxygen who are given more. These things are happening. And these things are happening at a time when I said literally people are dying on pavements. Outside hospitals, people are not given admissions into the hospitals because if I live in Delhi and I want an admission in a Noida or a Gurgaon hospital, I'll be denied admissions because I don't have a address proof. So at a time like this, the judiciary has risen to the occasion. It has come to the rescue of the citizens. It has time and again passed orders, at times arm twisting the government, state government, central government to do what they should have done on their own in the first place. For instance, if I could run you through as to what transpired in the Supreme Court yesterday, let me take the example of vaccination. Now, this is visible to all of us that in the first round, the government of India decides that free vaccination will be given to all. But for the second round, suddenly we see that a separate arrangement is created and a differential pricing is there for the state governments and one for the central government. And there is even one price for the private hospitals. So the Supreme Court stepped in yesterday and asked the central government to do a policy rethink on this issue and said, on vaccination, you have to do something about it. Why don't you have a national immunization program and give vaccine shots free of charge to your citizens? What will happen to those poor people, those illiterate people living in rural areas? On vaccine registration, they said, how are they going to register? Through a CoWIN app you have. People don't have net connectivity. This is being done on a assumption that everybody has access to internet. What about the people living in hilly areas where the net connection is very poor? How will they get registered? You can't leave out a single citizen in times of this national emergency. Again, a policy rethink has to be done. Why does the court have to step in every time and tell the government as to what is to be done? However, all said and done, there are people who believe that the judiciary is crossing its Lakshman Rekha and interfering in the government's job as to how to run the nation. And they have points. They make valid points. They say judiciary is not well equipped to deal with complex and technical situations like vaccination, medical infrastructure. And these are issues which should be left to the government to decide, because what we have in a democracy like ours is an elected government which has the people's mandate, and they came to govern. They were elected. They have their reasons to make those arguments, but I have mine. At a time when I said the institutions are failing us, Election Commission, the Parliament, I haven't heard a whisper from people's representatives except for a few opposition leaders. Nobody from the government has criticized their own government for these poor efforts to bring succor to the people. Nobody. Two major institutions, executive is overworked. I know bureaucrats who themselves are COVID positive, but they are working round the clock to ensure that the systems are in place. However, it's just breaking down under the tremendous pressure of work that they are facing. So we have Parliament which has failed us. We have Election Commission which has failed us. We have an elected government which has failed us. And even to a certain extent, the fourth estate, the media has failed us. In fact, I do not entirely agree that the media has done its job properly. I don't agree with that argument. Although there will be some media houses who might believe that they have done their jobs, but the kind of debates, the conversations we see in the evening, they're blaming people, saying that what wrong has the government done? They're trying to change the narrative. What has elections got to do with the spread of pandemic? All you have to do to see through the hollow claims of the media are just to go to the television channels and the kind of narrative they peddle out in the evening, coming to the rescue of the central and the state governments. I do agree they have been critical. Where was the media when the Kumbh was happening? Why did they not point out on the day one? It's only when you started having cases of COVID, then everybody started saying, oh, Kumbh is all bad. Why did the central government not step in and tell the state government, what are you doing? What was wrong? Why did we allow religious congregations to happen? So it's not all right that the media has done its duty. It hasn't, I believe so. Now here, questions are again being asked as to what is the court's business to interfere in an occasion like this? So to those naysayers, I want to point out that right to health is a part of your fundamental right to life. It is inherent, embedded into your right to life. And anything which interferes with your right to life, you have the right to knock at the doors of the court. And the court has all the business to intervene in times like this and tell the government about their shortcomings and also tell them as to what is to be done in a times like this. So on a positive note, hoping that all of you will stay safe in the days to come. I want to thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can ask me, please.
Thank you, sir. We have one question posted on the chat. I'll read it out for you. You've been covering legal issues for so long, sir. Don't you think the Madras High Court, or Delhi High Court, or Supreme Court, or judiciary as such on the whole are so late in their responses?
I entirely agree. I do not give a clean chit to the judiciary either. They are late in their response. Last time, when the problem of migrant laborers was happening, the Supreme Court refused to take note of it for months. And it was only after a lot of criticism that the Supreme Court decided to step in. So it's not that the judiciary can be given a clean chit or the judiciary has come out with flying colors. No, our institutions have failed us. And when I say failed us, I very emphatically say even the judiciary failed us. But now, when the situation is getting tough, they have risen to the occasion.
Thank you for your address, sir. With this, we come to the end of session 1. Our hunger for knowledge is being taken care of here, but let's go fill our tummies too. Now we break for lunch and we gather back by 1:25 p.m. and the session will commence at 1:30 p.m. We have Professor Dr. Ivory Lyons, Dr. Nirvana Bechan, Professor Dr. Aman Watts, Professor Dr. Trishu Sharma, and Dr. Anu Das lined up for the session afternoon. See you all after a healthy lunch.
Thank you very much, Kalyan. See you in the next session.
Yeah, thank you, Kalyan. Take care.